Alright, what is up, everybody? It's the saltiest Gaijin here, coming to you on YouTube for the first time. We're going to start our YouTube channel off here with actually not even a gameplay video. We're going to start us off here with playing some, well, actually just reviewing some Magic the Gathering cards. Definitely a lot of fun to be had here. You know, there's a new product coming to NTG Arena. So there's a lot of hype going around with Magic. Of course, Time Spiral Remastered is coming out here fairly soon, which a lot of tabletop Magic players are excited for. But you know, us MTG Arena players, well, we're getting a little something spicy too. We're gonna take a look here, of course, at the wonderful product that's coming out, the Historic Anthology. This is actually the fourth Historic Anthology that we'll have had. But this is definitely one of my more favorited products on MTG Arena. Less due to what comes with it, because those things do vary kind of a lot. But as far as what you see is what you get. You pay $20. I think this one works out to about 4,000 gems. And you just get 4 copies of all the cards in it. You know, it's not you spent $20, bought some booster packs, didn't get what you wanted. Tough. It's a very, very nice product that way. It's actually, I would say, you know, probably the least predatory product on Arena, because the problem with the Arena, there's a whole, I could talk for an hour about just about how the MTG Arena economy is very predatory and unfortunately, well, just not very nice to players. But we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look here at Historic Anthology 4, one of the better products that we're going to be having here. So, we'll start here. The juicy new white editions. Juicy. We got Triumphant Reckoning. So I believe this is actually from Commander Legends, if I know my set symbols correctly. So taking a look at it here, it's at 6 generic, 3 white. That's pretty steep. Gonna have to do something real good to get around that. It's return all artifacts, enchantment, and planeswalker cards from your graveyard to the battlefield. Well, just reading this card, I can tell you that this is definitely a commander card. And I'm not even sure it would be good there. Yeah, I don't really see this one being, well, anything remotely close to relevant. I can't see it being played in historic brawl even, not even really in cubes. So this is, unfortunately, sometimes we do get stinkers in these types of products, and just an attempt from Wizards of the Coast to kind of put interesting cards. And I do wish they would maybe do a better job at curating some of the cards that they choose for this, but sometimes you're going to get bad ones. But more excitingly, and here's the real juice, Declaration in Stone. So this card, when a lot of people look at this card, they see, of course, you know, it's exile target creature. We'll just read its text. And all other creatures its controller controls with the same name that player investigates for each non-token creature exiled this way. So what that says is investigate means they get a clue token. And so for any number of creatures you get, they get clues, barring tokens. So this is actually a really good addition for white. White has 2-mana removal. Right? They have Glass Casket, Baffling End, Seal Away. I'm sure there's something else that I'm forgetting. And then they also have Skyclave Apparition. So Skyclave, all of those things are good at dealing with small things. Apparition being especially good because Apparition not only deals with like creatures, it deals with enchantments, planeswalker cards, even of course all artifacts, you name it, no whole 9 yards. But what it also deals with, and this is where you get into a lot of, like, when white gets good, its removal gets worse in the metagame, is that Skyclave Apparition also just deals with the removal the other white decks play, like the Glass Caskets and the Baffling Ends. And the tricky part with those is that if those get removed incidentally, which a lot of decks, as we see playing more and more, you know, we have decks that just play main deck Knight of Autumn. You know, you have Skyclave Apparition. You have, you know, just odds and ends, ways to deal with artifacts. or enchantments, whether that be temporarily or permanently. So this adds an element to white that I really like, which is that it will give white hard removal, efficient hard removal that's playable. Sure, you have the argument that giving him clues isn't ideal, but still, 1 and a white, exile target creature. If the only questions asked is that they get a clue, I'd rather my opponent have to pay 2 mana to draw a card than have, like, whatever massive creature they played. Very strong. And then lastly, more juice, as they called it, Thraben Inspector. This is just a solid card. Humans is a tribe. In the historic format, it has tribal support, and it's been a little bit of a struggle for that kind of deck. But even like just Thraben Inspector in like white aggro decks, in goodness, different vehicle strategies, which was played in standard, and then even straight up just human tribal. It can actually be a card that really fills a lot of gaps. It's an efficient one drop, not the best one drop, but a fine one, because it replaces itself and it gives you that clue. And if you have ways to say take advantage of that artifact, then that can get really good. So I think these Poopy edition, very, very good additions. Moving on, we have 2 bad cards and a good card. So this feels a little lazy to me. I feel like if you're going to include this card just in general, like why wasn't this in a Moncat remastered? Probably because it was too bad. But it is what it is. We did play against Cat Tribal. We were playing an artifact-based deck against a aggressive cat strategy on one of our recent streams, and I don't even think Cat Tribal would play this, but like, I guess Cat Tribal is a thing. Spider spawning. I'm upset about this for various reasons. This was a limited all-star, and that's well and good, but spiders. Really? Spiders? More spiders. Ugh. Moving on, we got Think Twice. So Think Twice is interesting. It's a fine control card. Draws a card for 2, flashes back for 3 to draw another card. All instant speed. Not bad. Do I see it getting played? Not really. Because, like, what is this card other than a slightly more flex... Like, it's like a... It's a 5 mana draw 2. So instead of playing, say, one of the 4 mana draw 2s, because you have many of those, you have Chemister's Insight, you have Behold the Multiverse, and even you have Glimmer of Genius. And those are all better than this, because the Insight can be cast twice. Once regularly, once on Jumpstart, so it can draw a total of 3 cards. But it also, if you have ways to take advantage of that discard, there's even some utility there, so decks that have played that in the past have typically been able to use their graveyard in some way. Behold the Multiverse has Foretell, so you can use it as a bluff, as well as it scries 2. And then Glimmer of Genius, again, it scries 2. So Glimmer of Genius is basically, if you're playing any ways to use energy, play this over Behold the Multiverse. So it's just, I don't know. It's an interesting card. It gives you something to do on 2, which is relevant. Because like if you're playing a sensor strategy, I see Think Twice being fairly fine. But even there, I'm just not sold on a card like this for control. But it's a neat addition to the format. We got some snow cards. We got Iceberg Cancrix. This card is not good. That's all I'm really going to say about it. It's another mill crab, except this one checks on snow permanents. Woo! Most of the snow permanents in your deck are going to be lands anyway. So just kind of a worse ruin crab, not necessarily a card I'm excited to see. A card I am really excited to see, though, is Merit Leisure Slumber. So what's really cool about this is that this is a ramp payoff. Now, I'm not a fan of the green ramp decks, mostly because in Historic, they've just had this kind of weird, dominant Well, at least for a while, they had a weird dominant just stranglehold on the format, and it was not fun to play when ramp was really good. And this gives ramp decks a payoff because if they just play like the explosive vegetation style effects, they're just grabbing snowlands out of their deck. Once you can get up to 10 snow permanents, which if you're just playing a lot of snowlands, you can definitely do. You just start getting the 2020. Now, what's really cool is that, at least about Merit Lage's Slumber, is that in this format, it is going to be a little balanced. There's a lot of ways to deal with enchantments. So this card does reward you for playing it on turn 2 because you get to scry the more snow permanents you put into play. But it also then exposes it to like Skyclave Apparition, exposes it to a whole just Night of Autumn, really just any level of interaction that can deal with enchantments, which as we talked about before, there's incidentally more and more of that showing up in the format in main decks that I don't see this being a prominent part of the metagame, but I see it being a payoff card for ramp strategies. Pushing them into this snow, which I think is at least an interesting direction, because this isn't free to play. Rydane, like we've talked about multiple times on stream, it's not just free to play snowlands. Like, you can't just get away with just throwing snowlands in your deck for no reason, because Rydane is a real card that exists in the format that people do play, and if all of a sudden all your lands are going to enter the battlefield tapped, that's bad news bears for you. You don't want to be in that position. We're going to move on here. We got 2 equipments and a Mirrodin card. We're going to start on the right. So, for anybody who plays Pauper, you know what Bone Splitter is. Absolutely love Bone Splitter. Really solid card for lower rarity formats. I don't really see it being a card that's particularly relevant. There's not really a whole lot of payoffs for equipment. There are equipment payoffs in the format, let me clarify. There aren't any, it's not worth playing Bone Splitter over another piece of equipment, because there's much better pieces of equipment. Got Goblin Cavalier, speaking of payoffs for equipment. This would be a payoff for equipment, except it's a goblin, it's a warrior, so its creature type's not necessarily irrelevant, it's just its effect doesn't add anything to goblin decks. There is technically a warrior tribe that's going, and there's even warrior stuff related to equipment. It's not very good. If you were to play a deck that wanted to play a lot of equipment, this might be a card you consider including as one of your 1-drops, but Fervent Champion, probably just better. Then we have our Sword of Body and Mind. So not the best sword, but it is the Sword of Get Bodied. So I've played a lot with this card, specifically in Cube. Matter of fact, for a whole Legacy Cube season, we did a conditional draft where if I saw Sword of Body and Mind, I had to take it. And I won a lot of games playing with Sword of Body and Mind. That being said, I don't think the strengths of Sword and Body and Mind really translate that well over to, Historic. Milling your opponent for 10. Now that Uro's gone, it's not exactly a huge drawback. And milling your opponent can be a very real way to win the game. But it's not to say that it goes without its drawback. There are a lot of escape cards that exist in the format. And making a 2/2 isn't great. And green and having protection from green and blue, that's cool, but we have our removal colors are black and white, and they're played quite a lot. So I don't see this sword adding much to the format. If you're gonna play it, not to mention it's a more traditional equipment where you play it and pay to equip it. I think if you're playing this card with a Fervent Champion, as an example, Fervent Champion reduces the cost of the equipped cost for things you're equipping to it. So I think is a way to take advantage of the sword, where the sword can come down on 3, you pay 0 and attach and attack with the Fervent Champion. So I see this being a maybe potentially a sideboard card in red aggro decks playing Fervent Champion. You could bring it in against green decks. If you're playing against one of the green Stompy decks or something like that, and it just can make your threats bigger, close the game a little faster. Well, these are interesting. Torment of Scarabs. This isn't great. That's really all there is to say about it. This was like a limited card at best, and it doesn't really translate over to constructed. Faith of Devoted. I've played this card in Commander. I don't really see it translating into a constructed setting. Not particularly great. I mean, there's not like a cycling deck that wants a 3-mana black enchantment, so not fantastic. But speaking of cards a cycling deck would want, Flameblade Adept, on the other hand, there is a cycling deck that exists. It is fairly fine. This adds a second 1-drop to that deck. So what that deck had is Fluttering Fox, which is this is no Fluttering Fox in that deck. But being able to have a Fluttering Fox 1 through 4, and then Backup Dancer, Flameblade Adept that kind of does the same thing, but a little weaker. Having that is going to make that deck more consistent. Does it make that deck competitive? I think that remains to be seen. I don't really think it does. But Declaration and Stone comes into that deck as well. So now that deck's it's getting tools. I see there being a reasonable chance that when this goes live and we've purchased our Historic Anthology, that we're going to play cycling with Flameblade Adept, and we're going to try to tinker around with that kind of strategy. We got some Elf Tribal stuff. Well, as anybody knows how I feel about Elf Tribal, I already think these cards are unplayable. We got Lissalana Huntmaster, solid popper card. Gets played in Commander, was played, I think, in its standard. No, never mind, that's lore when I'm thinking of an older standard. Not great. I mean, like, if you're gonna play an elf deck, like, I could see why you would play this, but I think there's effects that do similar things for cheaper and have other abilities on them. So this card just feels like a waste. Abomination of Llanowar, again, it's not fantastic. There's a lot of exile-based, sweepers. Extinction Event, Anger of the Gods is in the format, that kind of stuff. And this card is just not good. I wouldn't play this. Like, there's an argument that, like, maybe you hit it off of Collected Company, you go super wide, and then it attacks with Vigilance and Menace. But it doesn't even have Trample, so that it being huge really isn't a plus. Okay. I like what we're seeing here. So Inspiring Sanctuary, Statuary rather. Again, this feels a little lazy. Like, this is a card just like the cat up top. It's like you could really just include this in the remaster set, so why didn't you? But we have here, it gives non-artifact spells you cast Improvise. There was a combo deck that played this in Standard. It was like a mono blue Improvise deck. Do I see that translating here? Not really. There's not really anything that, because if we think about the artifact-based combo decks we have, there's, Paradox Engine. There is a colorless Paradox Engine deck. I don't really see this being the kind of card. It pairs really well with Paradox Engine, because it makes all your artifacts tap for a spell, but then you have to be casting a, non-artifact spell every time, so I don't really see it being where we want to be. So we're probably not going to be playing around a lot with this one. Cold Steel, on the other hand, this is an interesting one. It makes snow mana, which is not necessarily that relevant, but it does add certain layers to decks. But it's another two. What's notable is that we have two 2-mana rocks, Mind Stone and Guardian Idol, and now we have a third one. And this one makes colored mana. So in certain variants, like say if we're playing a third color in that Paradox Engine deck, we might want to play this and not Guardian Idol, because this will fix our mana on top of being that acceleration. So it can do two things instead of one, versus those things where they both do two things instead of one. Guardian Idol's a creature. Mind Stone can sack itself to draw a card. Pretty decent. I think this is going to be a solid addition to those decks craving 2-mana ramp abilities. Blink Moth Nexus. Now this is pod racing. Like, this is the kind of card that we really, really want. So this is going to get played in a lot of decks. There is a deck playing the card Tempered Steel, because that card is in fact legal. This will slot really well into there. Really happy to see that. It's gonna play really well in like that colorless deck. It's just another creature that turns itself into a land. I even see this, since we don't have effects like Mutavault, I could see this being played as a fair card. Just looking at it. Like, I could see people playing this in like their control decks as a way to just start chipping in and closing the game with a 1/1 that flies. Not to mention it can block and make itself a 2/2. So it's a very strong land. Really exciting to see this. Technically synergizes with shapeshifters. I don't think that'll be very relevant, but just a solid addition to the format. We got Hamza, which I think is from a Commander product from the looks of that symbol. Looks like Commander Legends again. Looks like it's just a big creature. Costs less for every creature you have with a 1/1 counter on it, and creature spells cost 1 less. Okay, I don't really see this being very good. Those decks that really abuse that 1/1 counter theme don't really play expensive threats. Like Venerated Loxodon, but even then you don't want to reduce the cost of Venerated Loxodon this way. You want to convoke that, so I don't really see this being good. Amit Eternal, Afflict 3. Trying to remember what the heck Afflict does. Afflict. Afflict Mechanic. Okay, yes. Now, so this is whenever it attacks, if it gets blocked, the defending player loses that much damage. And then if it deals damage to our opponent, okay, that's definitely an interesting card. So it's essentially a 3-mana 5/5, gets smaller for every spell our opponent casts. But then, of course, if it deals damage to a player, it removes all the 1/1 counters. So I don't really see this being a huge card in the format, but it's definitely an interesting card to have in here. Moving on, we got Sawtosk Demolisher. Looks like probably a Commander product. Looks like probably a Ikoria Commander decks. But this looks like a really fun card. Mutate. And a Beast Within on mutating. So this is a really solid card, actually. So this is kind of like Gemraiser, card that got played a lot, in the sense that Gemraiser would mutate onto something and just destroy, you know, an artifact or enchantment. This expands it into killing planeswalkers as well as technically lands. You pop lands with this. I see this being a card that might bring those mutate decks, because there are decks that center on the mutate mechanic, might bring those, you know, up a notch. We have Harmless Offering up here next. So this is actually an interesting addition to the format because Demonic Pact was added in with a previous anthology. So Harmless Offering synergizes exceptionally well with Demonic Pact. Because for those who don't know, Demonic Pact allows you to pick between 4 modes, but you can only pick each one once, and then eventually one of the modes is you lose the game. So it is, you pick 3 modes, that's the last mode, you gift it to your opponent, and then when it goes to their turn, they only have one choice to pick lose the game. Very interesting card to add to the format. Not sure if that's going to be a very good combination in Historic, but it's definitely interesting that it exists. Then we have Collected Conjuring. This is a Collected Company style card, hence the name. So it's exile the top 6. You may cast up to 2 sorcery spells with CMC. Mana value. That's the new term, 3 or less among them. Put the exile cards not cast this way on the bottom. So I don't really see this being very good. I don't think you could play enough sorceries in a deck to really take advantage of this. So that's unfortunate, but we'll move on. There's one card left, and it's Death Shadow. Oh boy. Death Shadow is a beast of a magic card. Now, it is interesting in the fact that we don't have fetch lands, but we do have shock lands. And we have lands like Agadeem's Crypt, which you have to pay 3 life to put on the battlefield. So I see this being very strong in certain decks. It has its drawbacks. It is a creature that can get hit with Claim the Firstborn, which is a very big part of the format. You know, creatures that can get hit with Claim the Firstborn tend to be a little weaker. But even if your opponent's just at 20 life, or more than 13 life, what happens is, if they claim the Firstborn, it comes over to them and just immediately dies. So it's especially bad against Claim the Firstborn, given if your opponent has a high life total. So there's another version kind of like this, where it's kind of bases it more off of the player with the highest life total. It's kind of like this in reverse, in a manner of speaking, but definitely seems like it's a very interesting place to bring Death Shadow into the format. I don't see it being like a dominant force, because unlike Modern, where like you'll play against strategies that can't answer things, most strategies will be able to answer Death Shadow. But you may play against, say, a deck like Paradox Engine. That's not going to have a good answer to Death Shadow. And Death Shadow will be a very, like, if you can reduce your life total enough by playing cards like Thoughtseize, Shock lands, the 3-life lands, you know, you're going to be in a good spot. You know, and then especially if you pair this with, say, an effect like Embercleave as a really good example. Like, Embercleave will just end the game. If this is like a 8-8 or a 10-10 or, Lord forbid, a 12-12 or something, and you play that and it comes in 13-13 with double strike and trample, it'd be absolutely absurd. So this would be a fun card to play around with. I think there's a lot of interesting things to play around with here. So I'm really excited. So, of course, if you want to see how me, the Saltiest Gaijin, is going to be playing with these cards, you can tune into my Twitch at twitch.tv/thesaltiestgaijin. Of course, I appreciate everybody taking the chance to go ahead and take a watch here as to what our take on the Historic Anthology 4 is. Don't forget to click that like button and subscribe, and feel free to share on any of your social media platforms. I appreciate you watching, and we will see you again soon.